Hey, thank you all so much for watching this, my first video in my abbreviated countdown to the 89th Annual Academy Awards. At the bottom of the screen you will find my social media links, my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook, and my Snapchat. So let's chat Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Fair warning, for this category in particular, I usually don't like the nominees. I sometimes think voters pick the right movie but not the right performance, and a lot of the times I think people are looking at overall bodies of work rather than the work in the film itself. Granted, this can be applied to a lot of Oscar categories, but I usually find it to be a little bit more prevalent here. First up is Mahershala Ali for Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. The actor, who has had a hell of a year between Moonlight, another Best Picture nominee, Hidden Figures, Netflix's Luke Cage, and an Emmy nomination for HBO's House of Cards, features as Juan, the crack dealer who becomes a father figure to a young, often neglected child named Chiron. The film snapshots Chiron's adulthood and adolescence in addition to his childhood, but it is in that first early sequence that Juan makes his first and really only impression. And that's kind of why he got nominated. While I feel that many of the men in the supporting cast of Moonlight stand out more than Ali does, he certainly does make an impression when he's on screen, and perhaps even more of one when he's off screen because of how he influences the growth and development of Chiron into an adolescent and ultimately into the man he becomes. Ali's most powerful scene, and arguably one of the most powerful scenes in the film, involves Chiron asking him, well, if you've seen the movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. And if you have not seen this movie, what are you waiting for? Like, really, I think it's on digital now. And I know some theaters are playing it a couple times a day because of Oscar season. There isn't really an excuse at this point. Following Ali is Jeff Bridges in David Mackenzie's Hell or High Water. In this role, a Texas Ranger pursuing two bank robbers despite being on the brink of retirement, the Oscar-winning dude really does feel like a co-lead and therefore like he's in the wrong category. As for how I feel about the performance itself, it's a tricky one. It's ultimately a long explanation for why I feel like it's not a great performance. I have to dig a little into genre for a second, so bear with me. This is where all the research I did for that video essay on Hell or High Water that I never got around to recording will come in handy. And the reason I did this research is because the Western is never a genre that I have particularly liked. So my familiarity with it is about like this. But to summarize the broadest implications of the genre, there's a very strict code of morality. One side is absolutely right, the other side is absolutely wrong. It's a far stricter moralistic code than, say, the romance or the comedy would have. But modern interpretations of the genre, often known as neo-westerns, often try to turn that moralism on its head. As it turns out, Hell or High Water does raise the question of whether or not the end justifies the means for the robbers played by Ben Foster and Chris Pine. But the film doesn't really answer that question, or even explore it a whole lot. Moving to another big theme of the neo-western, which is tied in with the moralistic thing, is that there is an established norm, usually represented by a character or set of characters, who are facing an uncertain future in the form of a changing norm. In other words, to quote Carly Simon, that's the way I've always heard it should be. And that's where Bridges comes in. He is an embodiment of the established norm who is troubled by an uncertain future. This is expressed both in how the aforementioned Pine reacts to Bridges and in the pushback from Bridges' Native American partner, played by Gil Birmingham, when he makes some off-color jokes at his expense. And while the question of these changing norms is basically placed on Bridges' shoulders, Hell or High Water basically says, to hell with it. It raises these concerns and these questions without really solving them, opting instead to account for the robberies themselves and a couple of shootout sequences. So in terms of accent, Bridges is essentially marrying Bad Blake from 2009's Crazy Heart and Rooster Cogburn from the 2010 adaptation of True Grit. And that's really all I feel he's doing here. I get that the performance is supposed to be this representation of the norms, and that's technically what it is, but the movie goes nowhere with it. So yeah, I don't see the brilliance in this performance, even though I like Bridges in general. Next up is Lucas Hedges for Kenneth Lonergan's Manchester by the Sea. I've made it no secret how much of a slog I thought this film was, and how I thought Casey Affleck's performance, that has been praised pretty much by everybody, to me comes across as moping on screen 101. For the record, I have been meaning to give this movie another shot, but I had to clean my andirons.
And you don't even have a fireplace. Not that I would know this.
Anyway, Hedges broke out in a major way as the recently orphaned nephew of Affleck. It didn't hurt that, in least in terms of time on screen, he could be perceived as a co-lead. Despite not falling head over heels for Lonergan's drama about grief, I will give Hedges this. He conveys certain, well, uncertainties that come with being a teenager. While he's hardly removed from that particular time in life, bringing that to the screen is not necessarily an easy task. You have to have the right presence and the right skill set, of course. And you sometimes do feel the pressure and anguish that he feels from his very unfortunate family situation. Long story short, I found the work to be solid, but not particularly incredible. But maybe that second glance will change my mind. The fourth nominee is Dev Patel for Garth Davis' Lion. He leads roughly half the film as a grown-up adoptee who is trying to find his birth family. The story itself goes nowhere narratively uncharted, but damn if it is not effective. Patel captures the descent from carefree to distraught, and ably embodies the conflicting emotions of someone who loves his adoptive family, but also wants to find his roots. As for the claim that Dev Patel was category frauded into supporting so he could get the nomination and possibly the win, kinda. I mean, look at what happened with Carol last year, so this should not have surprised us. I mean, he is not the lead for the entire film, but I would say that he and Sonny Pawar, the child actor who leads the first half of the film, double as the leads here. I guess you could make the argument for something like Moonlight, with Alex Hibbert, Ashton Sanders, and Trevante Rhodes being considered co-leads, but I do feel that that narrative is split enough to the point where you have three separate things going on, and to me that does strike as a supporting situation. Closing out the lineup is Michael Shannon for Tom Ford's Nocturnal Animals. Now, of all the films to pick up major recognition for films released in 2016, Nocturnal Animals is probably the most divisive, even if La La Land haters are the loudest. But Shannon's performance is one of the few components of Nocturnal Animals that most of us seem to agree on. But why is that? I've always viewed this thriller as a test of rhetorical distance and how it affects our perception of events and stories. For instance, a virulent event and a violent aftermath are what make up the majority of the novel that takes place within the film, the novel that Amy Adams is reading as the film progresses. And that is far more devastating than anything that happens within the main story, which is essentially about Amy Adams ruminating on her life choices and ultimately deciding that she probably screwed up somewhere along the way. But despite that, the main narrative is the one that seems to have the most pull. And that's what makes me think the film is about rhetorical distance. We are closer to Adam's narrative because that is the one that is being presented as the main story. And then once we get into another narrative, that is when, despite the events themselves being more horrific, it doesn't have the same kind of power. And that, for me at least, informs why people like Michael Shannon's performance so much. While I'd be hard-pressed to pick a certain moment from his performance, he immediately comes across as a character as soon as you see him. And again, I think that's the point. Moving to my personal favorites here, I think Dev Patel gives far and away the best performance of the lineup, and as I just mentioned, I am a big fan of Michael Shannon in Nocturnal Animals. I also think Nocturnal Animals is a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for, and although I'm not in the camp that thinks he gives the best performance in the film, or even one of the strongest performances in the film, Mahershala Ali does leave enough of an impact to where I can understand his pull and how he is getting the nomination. His multivalent father figure packs an emotional punch straight to the gut. So who wins? Mahershala Ali. Probably who I would have said before the BAFTAs. Granted, landing the cover of The Hollywood Reporter in the final stretch of voting is an excellent move, and that probably has helped him a lot. And besides, he's more or less been the frontrunner. He's been winning critics awards left and right the entire season. But the BAFTA win for Dev Patel may forecast an Oscar night upset. We've seen things like that with BAFTA before. And while the British prize is the only one that Dev Patel has really picked up this season, he leads like half of his movie. Ali, meanwhile, is only in the first third of his film. And hey, Oscar voters may even remember Dev Patel for leading Slumdog Millionaire, which won Best Picture back in 2008. Looking at the other nominees, you've got Jeff Bridges. He won relatively recently, and The Passion for Hell or High Water just does not seem to be there. If there is a Best Picture nominee that kinda sorta randomly picked up scattered nominations that has a shot at upsetting somewhere, it's probably Hidden Figures. And of course, I'll talk about that later. Lucas Hedges, despite having a large chunk of screen time in the movie that was once a Best Picture frontrunner, never really had the momentum to win at any one point this season. And as I've mentioned, and as you probably already knew, Nocturnal Animals is far too divisive to pull off a win in a category where there is not consensus for it. So Michael Shannon will have to win another year. So there you have it. Again, thank you so much for watching. I have my social media links on the left side of the screen. Of course, hit that like button if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more content from me. I will talk to y'all later. Thanks again. Bye!